Welcome to Beautiful Work, Beautiful Life. I am so excited today to introduce you to my guest, and I'm not going to do that yet. First, I want to welcome you, introduce myself, and introduce my co-host. So, have you been here before with us? If not, you're in the right place. We have been bringing Beautiful Work, Beautiful Life to the world for over 4 years now. This is our 5th season. And we are focusing on the conversation about doing inner work and creating a beautiful life. So, whether you're new to the inner work or the podcast, I'm so happy that you're here. And if you've been with us before, thank you for coming back. It is because of you, our listeners, that it is so much fun to show up. All right, let's get going. I'm going to introduce myself, Laurel Boivin. I'm one of the co-hosts of this podcast. I am a leadership coach and a speaker. You'll find information about me, the work that I do, and how to reach me in the show notes. My co-host, Laurel Holland, she is a life coach and an author. She's not here with me today, but she'll be back for more conversation in the coming weeks. And the conversation with her is always delightful. I will put information about her, the work she does, and the books that she has written in the show notes for you. Please know that if you need support in your inner work journey, in your career, in your life, we are here for you. What else do I want to tell you? Let me go back to my guest. My guest today is Nick Tucker. Recently, I had the pleasure of interviewing Nick in an episode that we called Becoming Resilient with Nick Tucker. Let me tell you a little bit about Nick. Nick is a husband, a father, a speaker, a storyteller. He is passionate about resilience, service, and helping others discover their own strength. He is founder of Camp Nick, a youth adventure camp in Los Angeles that he has run for a decade, guiding children through experiences of play, community, and independence. As a speaker, Nick shares his lived experience of loss, healing, and growth, inspiring audiences to embrace self-awareness, set boundaries, and pursue the inner work that leads to becoming their best selves. So as I mentioned recently, I had the honor of sitting down with Nick Tucker in a recent episode. In that episode, Nick openly shared about his childhood. He talked openly about losses and challenges that shaped him and the inner work it took him to grow into the husband, father, and speaker he is today. We talked about resilience and not just bouncing back, but as transforming for the better. And Nick's honesty about grief, self-awareness, and becoming was deeply moving for all of you. And that's why we're bringing him back. At 23 years old, Nick Tucker, he was ready to change but not sure how to. So he set out with a friend, Sam, to walk across the country from Maine, more than 3,400 miles, to Los Angeles. He and his friend Sam walked for 7 months. They covered 16 states, 8 million steps, and volunteered in 20 communities along the way. Today, we are devoting our entire conversation to that story, the story of his walk across the country. I believe that his story is going to be a powerful reminder that we have the choice to keep moving forward, to take one step at a time towards the life that we want and the person we want to become. With that, I hope you'll join me in giving a warm welcome to my guest, Nick Tucker. Welcome, Nick. I'm so happy that you're here with us again.
I'm happy to be back.
So today, we're going to really just dive into the walk, your walk as a 23-year-old across the country from Maine to LA. I've forgotten how many states, but 7 months.
7 months, 2 days. We didn't walk every single one of those days, but that was from start to finish. We started on August 6th, 2011, ended March 8th, 2012.
So one of the things I've been thinking about is, in our last conversation, you talked about there was that point you had graduated from college, you didn't get the fellowship, and you picked up the phone and called your friend Sam and said, I'm going to do this. I'm going to walk across the
Yeah.
country. And I want you to take us back there to that time and place. And what were you feeling? What were you thinking? What were you sensing that was calling you on this adventure?
I wish I had the definitive answer to that. The reality is sometimes we just have a deep calling that we can't explain. But I'll bring you back. And sorry if I'm going to be redundant because I don't recall what exactly we covered the first time around. But I remember, as I told you, I believe in the first episode, that my guardian Lisa handed me a book, and I just finished my last final at Colby. It was December of 2010. I was done, just done college, graduated with my bachelor's of arts and economics. And the first thing that she does when I get home before the holidays is she hands me that book that says to me, this reminds me of you. And then I read the book. It was about a guy who lost everything and he was just like depressed and didn't know what to do next. So he's like, I'm going to get rid of all my belongings and I'm going to walk as far as I can. And that was from Seattle to Key West, Florida. And if you recall, at that moment, I put down the book and I'm like, man, here I am in southern Maine, York County, North Berwick. Where would be the furthest I could walk? And I'm not Jesus, so it's not going to be Hawaii. So it's going to be Southern California. And again, it was just a seed. It's just something fun to think about. Oh, what kind of adventure would that be? How fun would that be?
As a
But I was waiting.
23-year-old, everything is fun and adventurous, right?
Yeah, especially when you're just contemplating your future and you have a couple opportunities just kind of floating in the wind. Am I going to get them? And am I not going to get them? And I have 3, 4 months until I find out. One, Teach for America, and the other, the one I really wanted was the one you mentioned. It was the Watson Fellowship, which
Oh,
was going to take me on an adventure. It's
okay.
$25,000 grant to leave the country for a year to embark on a journey on a project of your choosing. In between December reading that book and March hearing back from the fellowship, there was this idea of walking across the country. And it was strong enough where when I got together with Sam in February just to catch up, I sat down and I'm like, Sam, if I don't get this fellowship, I really want to walk across the country.
So you don't get the fellowship,
I don't get it.
and Sam says yes,
Sam says yes.
and you start planning this adventure.
Yeah.
And I'm so curious. Here you are, a young man with a college degree. Was there feedback in your life that was like, what are you doing? Get a job?
Yes. Look, Lisa, my other mom, my guardian, didn't, I don't think at first she understood why I wanted to take this walk across America. I my family was a very blue collar working class family. They didn't go to college. My mother, she had her associate's degree, but the Laurians, some of us went to college, but they didn't, Lisa and Paul, they didn't go to college. And she's not quite understanding why I want to do this. My my mother's sister, my aunt Laurie, didn't really understand. She's like, well, are you sure you want to do this? My Nana, God blessed her heart, was like, go work for a bank. You're going to waste your education. My ex-girlfriend, Molly, was like, you're avoiding reality. But I'm not one to easily be deterred. And I'm not one to always take the advice of others for better or for worse. So that
So,
was a lot of the feedback.
yeah. And so without the encouraging feedback, you boldly, committed to do this, and you and Sam set out. So tell our listeners kind of maybe a little bit about the planning that went into it before you left, and then, you know, how you managed for 7 months to be walking across the country
I mean, how do you plan for something where you don't know exactly what's going to present itself?
Can we
You know,
talk
we're
about
about
this? People
right.
do it all the time. That's life.
Yeah, that's life. So we
We plan. We try to plan because we search for certainty.
yeah.
And so here you are.
So
I'm
here we
sure
are.
our
Okay.
audience are planners and certainty seekers.
Yeah. Here we are. We made the decision. That's what it started
That's
with,
right.
right? We're going to walk across the country. So now there are a few obvious hurdles, right? Money. How much is it going to cost to get our butts from southern Maine to California? I didn't have a lot of money in my bank account. Uh, I had worked some months after college, but I think I had like $3,000 in my bank account. Certainly not enough to get us two men across the country. So we were planning. We're like, we need money. How much is it going to cost? I calculated 17 grand. It's going to take us 17 grand. Okay, how are we going to get that money? All right, we're going to have to fundraise. So the question becomes, what do we want the walk to be about? We were both adamant that we didn't want to raise money for a certain cause. Like, there's some obvious causes we could raise money for. One, AIDS, right? I could have walked across the country to raise awareness for AIDS or addiction or recovery or any one of the numerous things that ailed my parents. But I didn't want to be, I don't know exactly what it was. I didn't want to do that. I wanted it to be about something else. So Sam and I came up with this idea. We called it Making Strides, Rediscovering the Dream. But what
Mm.
we wanted to do, we decided was we wanted to just commit random acts of kindness, right? We didn't want to be the walkabout AIDS. We just wanted to help when needed, wherever we were needed. I think in our 23-year-old brains, we're like, we'll just walk across the country, do random acts of kindness, and encourage everyone to do random acts of kindness and spark this movement of random acts of kindness. And it's going to change the world. What it ended up being, and we'll get into this, is less random acts of kindness and more scheduled volunteering for various organizations from coast to coast. Because believe it or not, when you're walking in the middle of nowhere, random acts of kindness just don't present themselves.
You mean the opportunity for random acts of kindness don't present themselves?
Yes, not as much as you would hope.
Hope, right?
So we're going to cut it, making strides, we're discovering the dream. We're going to walk across the country, committing random acts of kindness, volunteering for various organizations. We're going to change the news cycle. We're going to bring good news, and we're going to spark this movement of doing good deeds. And that was that was our convoluted dream, right? A little naive, maybe, but that's what we wanted to do. We wanted to have the freedom to help wherever and whenever, whatever opportunity presented itself.
Yeah. So you
So
leave you leave Maine.
we leave
Where was
Maine.
your first stop?
We leave to volunteer.
Or yeah, on the walk. Like I know I've seen a map of your route,
Yeah,
right? So you set out.
yeah,
Do you know where you're sleeping? Do you know where you're eating? Do you like all of those things that I think about in planning,
yeah.
right? I mean, what did it look like for you?
So we left Short Sands Beach in York, Maine. We didn't have a tent yet. That was still coming in the mail. So Sam's dad, Mr. Rulo, at some point was going to have to find us out on the road and deliver that to us. But it was only going to be a couple days. We weren't going to be too far. We were on foot. We thought in the planning phase, there was going to be a mix of staying in cheap motels, pitching a tent, and possibly in the Northeast, staying with friends and family. We had a broad enough network where we saw that happening. And on our first day, we already were going to stay with a college friend of mine. We were going to stay with his parents in Rye, New Hampshire. So that was about an 18-mile walk for the first day. But
Yeah.
already by the second night, we were like, all right, well, what's 17, 18 to 20 miles away from Rye, New Hampshire? And it was Amesbury, Mass. I'm like, Sam, do you know anyone in Amesbury? No. Nick, do you know anyone in Amesbury? No. Do you know anyone that knows anyone in Amesbury? I don't know. So from the beginning, we're like, okay, this is going to be a little bit more serendipitous at this point than maybe we we thought. So we ended up at the Fairfield Inn in Amesbury, the only like hotel
That's
in
right.
the area. And already we're presented with the reality that there are going to be days we're going to go over budget because, we were thinking like Motel 6 money, not Fairfield Inn money. We didn't raise $17,000. We left having raised $3,500 plus whatever I had in my bank account, which I was perfectly willing to dip into if it came to that. But the Children's Homes of Little Wanderers outside of Waterville, Maine, they volunteered to be our fiscal sponsor. And that happened late in the game, like after we set a date. So then we were all of a sudden prepared to receive tax deductible donations. So I think within a week we had raised $6,500. And I was like, okay, that's not $17,000, but this will get us some of the way. Hopefully we'll raise some more along the way. I don't know if we raised half. Maybe we raised about half of $17,000 by the end of it. But spoiler alert, we made it under the amount that we thought we were going to need.
Yeah, I'm assuming you just pieced together this walk with this loose plan to walk 20 miles a day, to stay
Yeah.
somewhere safe at night, to have enough food to sustain you to be able to walk 20 miles a day. But it was a loose plan, is what I'm hearing.
We found out it was pretty loose. You know, it was getting late in the game. We started planning in March and we knew if we didn't set out, we were going to have to contend with winter. So we were having raised, I think, $3,000 at that point. We're like, all right, we just got to set a date and do this with whatever money we have,
Yeah.
with whatever money we have. So I had planned a route. I had planned an alternate route. By the time we got to California, we went through two cities on both of those routes that I had planned. And one was Los Angeles. So we were ending up there anyway. So that's about as tight of a plan as we had. Because when you're on the road and when you're faced with inclement weather, when you're faced with the day-to-day navigation, you find yourself figuring it out as you go along. And you just got to pivot when you need to pivot. And you're going to learn stuff early on that you never anticipated. And then you adjust and you keep going.
I have a lot of questions about the experience when you were on the road, but give our listeners just this picture of kind of the map. Which states did you walk through?
We headed south through New York City. And then once we got to New York City, we pretty much headed due west. And we went through all of Pennsylvania. And it was October. And by the time we got to Columbus, Ohio, we're like, man, I think it was probably around Pittsburgh we made this decision. We're like, after Columbus, we have to get south. It's getting cold. We went over the Appalachians. We had to cross those in Pennsylvania. And we were just noticing that if we didn't get south, if we tried to go through the Northwest or the Midwest and the Rockies, like that, weather-wise, it just wasn't gonna cut it. So we headed south after Columbus, Ohio. And then we headed south through Kentucky and Tennessee, all the way down into Texas. And we walked all of Texas. And it felt like we were in Texas forever. And we pretty much rode that southern route, hugging the 20 and the 10. Out here, they call it back east, we say I-95.
Yeah, that's
here,
right.
it's the 5, the 10, the 20. And we hugged that pretty much all the way into the Santa Monica Pier. And that was the route we took.
What did you carry with you? Like how big of a pack did you have?
I mean, we had a backpacking pack. If you picture somebody hiking the Appalachian Trail or the Pacific Crest Trail, just take that person
Yeah.
and then put them on asphalt.
Yeah.
And that was us. We had to be prepared to carry our whole life with us because
Yes.
we didn't know when we'd have the opportunity to sleep indoors, when we'd have the opportunity to grab a burger at McDonald's or sit at a cafe in Tennessee. We just didn't know.
So let's get into the experience. While we don't have all the details and we don't have to get into the weeds, what we know is you're carrying everything you have very little money, you have a very loose plan, and you have to be flexible enough to let your plan change based on your needs and the opportunity that presents itself. So, one of the questions I have is about what your expectations were about the people you were going to encounter and what you experienced. The expectation before you set off as this 23-year-old who's full of hope and optimism and maybe even some naivety. And then where on the road does your vision hit reality? And what does that look like?
I mean, it's an interesting question when you ask me what my expectations were regarding the people that we'd meet. But in terms of wanting to walk across the country, you said hope, you said optimism, you said
Naivety.
naivete. Not like that, but I'm going to say it like that. Naivete. If you take those three characteristics, you've pretty much described my approach to the world. And that overflows into my expectations or my perception of people in general. My view of people is that, I mean, we all have a great capacity for good, and most of us operate in that capacity. So I was probably excited to meet people, not thinking anything of it. However, I wasn't prepared to meet people who were going to warn me of other people, not specific people, just people, the amoebus, ambiguous group that might harm us. For example, in Tennessee, we were looking for somewhere to eat and everything was closed. But we passed this woman and we asked her if there's anywhere in this town where we can find something to eat. And she's like, well, no, everything's pretty much closed. But she's like, be careful. Don't go to the other side of the track. There's bad people over there. But we get to the other side of the tracks, and lo and behold, there's a barbecue spot open. We're like, oh, well, hey. It was like a dual place. I think it was a dance club at night / barbecue spot during the day. But we enter, and there's this Native American woman and I think a black lady behind the counter. And we're like, oh, this woman was warning us about the other side of the tracks where, to use the lingo of the day, people of color lived. I was like, that's interesting. That's not something I experienced in Maine, but I don't think I was prepared for that.
And so here you are experiencing perhaps people warning you about other people that are different than them or separate from them.
Yeah.
Did you run into places where people were really much more in a collective community?
I would say it's hard because when you're walking, a lot of our days were spent walking through these small towns where we didn't interact with anybody.
Yeah.
But if I'm thinking about the places, maybe we grabbed a hotel or we ate at a cafe or we went to church, on Sundays where we could go to church. We encountered many areas where there was community. And I will say this, Sam and I personally were treated very well all the way across the country. But what interested me was, here Sam and I are, a white man and a black man, and we're walking into these spaces, particularly in the South, where maybe we're warned of the other side of the tracks. But I was, from that lady, I didn't receive negative energy or any glare that would make me think that she thought less of me. But we weren't from that community. She was warning us about an area in her community. So maybe there's something here. There's some nuance here that I'm not quite getting, because it seemed like if I was just going to be stereotypical, a racist white woman warning us about where all the black people are, but she's interacting with me and I'm not getting that energy. Like, what is that? And when we were in the South and we go into church, it was amazing. Whoever we saw walking into the church represented the ethnic background of the whole church, with a few exceptions. If it was a black person in the church, Sam was going to be the only white person. If it was a white person walking in the church, I was going to be the only black person.
Yeah.
But it didn't matter. When we were in there, no one treated us any differently.
And I think that on the individual level, we more easily trust and respect and offer kindness to others.
Yeah.
And that might be tied into our animal survival spidey sense, right? If you meet one wolf, it's not as frightening as a pack of wolves, right? There might be something in that. And I think part of where we get lost in in society, in humanity, is by perceiving that we're not safe in a group that is not like us,
Yeah.
right? And so here you have this experience where you might have been the only black person in a church, but you felt safe. You were
Yeah.
safe. So I think it's interesting because when I think about humanity on an individual level, each and every person as an individual wants to treat other individuals with respect and kindness and honor. And we lose that when we get into a group think or a group where
Yeah.
we can hide behind a group. We're less inclined to treat individuals the way that we would if it was an individual to individual interaction.
Yeah. I think it's interesting, especially in 2025.
Yes,
We talk a lot in groups. I
we do.
think the racial narrative is still prevalent, but I think the political narrative is has risen above that. And
In
what I find interesting is there's a lot of othering, and I think people are afraid to hold people on a level or recognize people as an individual because then they got to contend with the good part of them or the ideas that they have or the rationale that they have that challenge our beliefs. And then we have to contend with our own beliefs. I think we're afraid if we sat down with somebody who doesn't believe like we do. I think the biggest fear is that they're rational in their thinking.
and that we have something in common and similar to them.
Yeah,
When we see ourselves in another individual that is not like us, it shakes our foundation. We start
yeah.
to question our own self when we meet someone who we have painted as not like us, and
Or as
then
evil,
or as
or as
right.
racist, or homophobic, or xenophobic, or as
That's yes,
all the
yes.
worst things you could call people.
That's right. And that, Nick, Laurel and I talk about this a lot, that shadow work that we all have to do, that looking at our dark side, because in every individual, we have goodness and evil. So if we're not willing to look at our own evil,
There's no grace
that's right.
for others.
And or ourselves. And so
Yeah,
it is really hard to encounter someone that either you're told is evil or you have perceived as evil because of their belonging in a certain group. Then we come to find out they're human and they're not that different than us.
yeah,
And that really is hard. It's interesting going back to your story about this woman who warns you of people on the other side of the tracks, even though visually you may have presented as someone with something in common with the
yeah,
people on the other side of the tracks, but she didn't put you in that group. And I think that's a great example of how we often will put other people that we don't even know, we'll put them in a group or we'll exclude them from a group based on
mhm,
our own perspective and our own experience. And
yeah.
so here, you experience this, and then you go on the other side of the tracks, and the people on the
It
other
was a
side of the
party.
tracks,
Barbecue was was great.
right? I want to talk about like that humanity, or maybe a story of kindness. Any of your experiences along the walk that kind of either strengthened your faith in humanity, stories of kindness from a stranger that really,
So many.
I can't wait to talk about
Look,
those next. Let's talk about the kindness of strangers. How do you relay those experiences to the belief and faith in humanity that you still have?
I've always had faith in humanity for as long as I can remember, and it seems antithetical given my mother's struggle with addiction. A lot of it may just be my temperament and the way I view the world. So instead of being resentful at my parents for using drugs and because they used intravenously, they contract AIDS and left this world too early, instead of that making me bitter or resentful, I accept it for what it is. But it helped me recognize their humanity because they weren't all one thing. They weren't just an addict. That's
That
identity I held for them. They were my
that's right.
parents. with capacity for good and evil.
Yeah.
So I brought this view of people on the walk with me. So when I encountered people, it was antithetical to what I believed about humanity. And already embarking with a faith in humanity, I guess there was this reality or this threat that that belief in humanity could have been completely decimated. But it wasn't. From the beginning, I told you the second night we were at the Fairfield Inn in Amesbury, and we're trying to figure out, we don't have a tent yet. We're trying to figure out, what we're going to do for the third night. And I was good at using the Colby College Alumni Network. And I'm like, let me just try this. And I hop on, and you can filter by location. And I just grabbed all the emails of alumni and parents of current students. And I'm just like, hey, we're going to be walking through Haverhill, Massachusetts tomorrow. We're walking, I gave them the whole spiel. We're walking across the country, blah, blah, blah. Does anyone know of a affordable motel or even a couch we can crash on? And within minutes, a guy who we didn't know was like, you can come stay with us. It's a little bit out of the way in Salem, New Hampshire, but we have a pull-out sofa in our basement. We took him up on the offer. We're like, wow, I didn't expect that to work. Like the only connection we have is Colby, but he's opening up his home. And we were able to use that alumni network all the way across the country. In the Northeast, from town to town, we could use it. As we got further and further, it was basically we almost would inevitably land ourselves at a Colby alumni's house when we were in the big cities doing our volunteer work. But there, I could still be like, we had the Colby connection.
Yeah.
Our first day in Pennsylvania, our first night, we had crossed into Allentown. We spent the night at this seedy motel. Anyway, the next full day, about to enter a small town in Pennsylvania with no motel and no obvious place to like pitch a tent. And Sam asked me, like, what are we going to do tonight? Like, where are we going to sleep? I'm like, I don't know. I had this faith that things would work out. And I was like, God would take care of us. And maybe it was one of those Christianese pleasantries you just kind of throw out there, those euphemisms. But I believed it. And we get up and we start walking. And we walk down the hill into this town in Pennsylvania. And this woman pulls over and she's waving us down. And she has like this bag. And we're like, what is this woman doing? But we walk towards her and she's like, I saw you walking. I picked you guys up some chocolate covered bananas. Frozen chocolate covered bananas. Would you like some? I'm like, yeah, that sounds awesome. And we're telling her about what we're doing. And she's like, that's awesome. Would you, my husband and I live in town. Would you like to spend the night at our home? And I can pick you guys up some sandwiches from a local sub shop. And this was the first time just some random stranger pulled over and offered us a bed. But that wasn't the first. I mean, that was the first, but not the only time strangers just like, here, have a bed. And if nothing else, that just reinforced my faith in humanity. And that Sam put it this way: people who are good, people who at least operate in their capacity for good, make themselves available, and people who don't make themselves less available.
So how do you think that these encounters, these moments of kindness from strangers shift the way you see the world? Or did they shift the way you see the world?
I think it reinforced the way I see the world.
And then what about shifting the way you saw yourself?
I never thought of that. These encounters with these people,
Yeah. Any of the encounters of kindness, did they shift the way you thought about yourself? And you
I don't know. There's been a long battle
go ahead, keep going.
with self and trying to hold myself in the same light that I hold others, and seeing myself the way I see others, because it's very easy, at least for me, and maybe other people as well, to see others as human and to offer them grace. Not everybody operates like that, but I operate like that, and it was much harder for myself to give myself that same sort of grace. The reality is, I'm with me 24/7 and I'm not with other people 24/7. So I know all my thoughts, all my actions, the things people don't see. But over time, I've been working on being kinder to myself. And I can say as I've gotten older, I definitely see myself as more and more human. I do not think I am good. I do not think I am bad. I think I have capacity for good and I have capacity for evil. And I try every day to operate in doing good as much as possible. And I ask for forgiveness when I miss the mark.
Yeah.
I think most people are just trying to do that on any given day. So I think it's really hard for me in the current political and ideological climate to watch people not give other people grace and see other people as a whole human who are going to make mistakes and who are going to hold views that you don't hold, but it doesn't make them pure, unadulterated evil. My hope is for people who operate in that space is that other people give them the grace that maybe they're not giving other people.
Yeah. I believe that we are given opportunity through other people who I like to think of as messengers or teachers, but we are given opportunity to learn to give ourselves grace.
Yeah.
And the practice comes when we more easily give it to others.
Yeah.
And then we begin to recognize that it's a capacity or an ability that I am capable of giving grace. I am capable of forgiving. And then when you begin to plant that seed and realize, it shifts your self-concept. And then when you start to look at it within, if I'm capable of doing that with someone else, I must be capable of doing it with myself.
Right. I say
Yeah.
that in my talk. I'm like, I go through the story of the trauma and misbehaving
Yes.
and being hard on myself and learning that I had to give myself the same grace I gave my parents and the
That's right.
same grace I extend to others. But you're absolutely right. It stemmed from the recognition that I'm worthy of grace too,
Yeah.
of my own grace, not just
Right.
other people.
Yes. So thinking back to the walk again, going back to this, what was your hardest day?
Oh boy, I don't have a hardest day, but in Eastern Texas, people kept warning us of Western Texas. They're like, there's nothing out there. Like you're gonna be walking through the desert. So, we went through Dallas and Fort Worth, and there was desertous terrain between there and Abilene, Texas. But after Abilene, Texas, I mean, we were just staring down refinery towns and desert brush and sage and barbed wire fences. But that was the high desert. And it was winter, so it was cool at night. We get down to the 40s, but that's okay. We had the gear, we had mummy packs that we'd snuggle up in at night to the sound of coyotes. We got a cart in Abilene, Texas, just to make sure we could carry enough water through the desert, which allowed us to take a lot of the weight off our backs. And we were averaging close to 30 miles a day. And then after New Mexico into Arizona, we walked down into Sun Valley. So that's Phoenix. And we realized the difference between the high desert and the low desert and how much hotter it is in the low desert. Now, thank God it was February and not August. We spent a week in Phoenix. We actually were there with Sam's brother and we volunteered for this organization, Stand Up for Kids, and then for 3 days. Their whole focus was to help homeless youth, and it was really grassroots, and it was a great experience. So leaving Phoenix, we learned really quickly that it was different walking in 85, 90-degree weather than it was walking in 60-degree weather up in the high desert. And we were hot and we ran out of water. And there was nothing between Phoenix and Quartzsite, Arizona, and Blythe. And that was a good 4 days of walking. So we were hot, sweaty, smelly, forced to walk on the dirt. And that's what made it hard. There was no frontage road. So for your viewers who don't know what frontage road is, it's usually the small road that parallels an interstate. So all through Texas, and we just walk on this little cracked potholed asphalt road, and we would just mirror. Sometimes it would maybe deviate for a couple hundred yards, but then it would meet up and run parallel to the interstate. But after Phoenix, there was no frontage roads. So we tried walking on an interstate, and within minutes, a police officer kicked us off. You're not allowed to. And we knew that because we had tried at other junctures in the walk. But you try to get away with when you can get away with. But when we were kicked on the other side of the barbed wire fence, we found ourselves pushing the cart through sometimes packed down dirt, sometimes through soft dirt over these little mounds. And it became very difficult. And then the cart would get these flat tires because of these little barbs in the desert, and we ran out of self-inflated or self-sealing tubes. So the cart died. Now here we are still walking in the literal desert, but now we have no cart, and we're throwing all that weight that we hadn't had on our backs for 1,300 miles back on our backs. And now we're in California, so we're going up, we're going down, and we have 30
It's
pounds back
hilly,
on our backs.
just
And
right. It's very hilly.
it's hilly.
Yeah.
And it was just, that was the toughest stretch, I would say, from Phoenix to the Indio Valley. But
So
we
when it was hard, that was a hard day or the hardest stretch of the
physically,
walk
physically,
physically.
yeah.
Tell me about emotionally and mentally in that
I mean,
physically hard spot.
it accompanied there because here we were thinking we were in the final stretch, and physically it was hard, but mentally it was tough because you're out there in the desert. I think Sam and I are pretty mentally and emotionally strong. So the walk never got to the point where it was so mentally or emotionally grueling where we were ready to throw in the towel. But I remember in Texas, and it was just like a sadness. And I remember walking ahead of Sam and just letting a few tears go because I was tremendously homesick, missing my family in Maine. So missing your family was an emotional component I didn't anticipate, but definitely felt. But it just propels you forward. So, let's get to the end of this so we can go back and see our families. But there was a lot of time of self-reflection, of dealing with the shadowy self, of prayer, for me personally, just trying to realign my life with the way I thought Jesus would want me to live it, because I just wasn't living in that way. But for me, it was my spiritual pilgrimage. This was necessary. This was gonna help set me back on the right path, or if not back on the right path, and set me on a right path moving forward.
What kept you going?
It wasn't just that we wanted to get to the end and see my family. We still set out on this journey to complete it. And I'd like to think I'm a completionist, but I was determined to walk across the country, to start in Maine and to end at the Pacific Ocean. And barring some gruesome injury or death, we were committed to doing that. So I think there was this personal challenge that we both undertook that also propelled us forward, because we were going to finish this hell or high water.
And I know when we talked the last time that you didn't set out on this walk as a spiritual journey,
Not intentionally.
but at some point you started to recognize the nature of the walk as a spiritual journey. When did you start to identify the walk as a spiritual journey? And was there something, an event or an interaction with another person that, kind of shifted the definition of the walk?
So the definition of the walk as a spiritual pilgrimage came
Yeah.
afterwards in hindsight.
Okay.
Even though with any awareness, I probably could have called it that beforehand. And I don't know if I did. I don't remember doing that.
The awareness
because,
of a 23-year-old, I'll remind you.
Yeah, yeah. Because there was some intention behind my desire to draw closer to God. And that was explicitly a part of the walk. Talked to my pastor about it. I'm sure I talked to Lisa and Paul about it. I wanted to do that. It was a time to get away. My pastor might have compared it to the Abraham moment. For those of your listeners who aren't biblically literate, Abraham's supposed to be the father of all nations. He was like rich and privileged, and God called him to leave his father's household, get uncomfortable, and go on this adventure. And if he And if he did, he would bless him and his descendants. So Abraham did that. So I'm like, I just need to get out of my home, away from what I'm comfortable with, and I just need to get out there with people, with God. So there was a spiritual element from the beginning. I guess didn't know to call it a spiritual pilgrimage, or didn't necessarily identify it as
Hmm.
that, because as I've said before, there was also this strong lure because it was just an adventure and it sounded fun. And I think in your 23-year-old undeveloped male brain, you're like, yeah, adventure, fun, walk across the country, challenge, ah. And there was that too.
And then where were you when you one day thought to yourself, this isn't fun? Did you ever have that on the walk?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if I categorize the walk as a whole as not fun, but there were
No.
plenty of moments where I was like,
Okay.
oh man, this isn't fun.
Tell,
You
tell, just tell us about one or two of those
I
moments.
mean, in around Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, we walked through like 3 days of record-setting rain. It's one thing when you're out there and it's raining for a day. Maybe you get to hopefully spend the night indoors at a motel and you can dry your stuff and the next day is dry. It's another thing when you're walking in day after day of rain and all your stuff is wet. Luckily, we did not have to spend the night outdoors in the rain. That was one thing I was always worried about. But while we were in it, we were just like kind of like cold and wet and walking 20 plus miles. And I was like, man, this isn't fun. But there was never a moment where I'm like, we're not going to do this.
Yeah.
This is not going to happen.
I want to talk for a minute about your volunteer opportunities. So here you are walking with a
Yeah.
loose plan. And how did you find volunteer opportunities?
So we had to learn early on our volunteer opportunities were mostly available in metropolitan areas. So the cities kind of became our interim destinations. So before we get to the city, that's when we'd hop on the Kobe network and we'd be like, hey, we're going to be in the city in a week. Do you know any volunteer opportunities? I don't know if there was a city where we couldn't find one. In every city, we found one or multiple. So in Louisville, Kentucky, we found a St. Joseph's, and it was this group home for kids. And that was probably our most impactful volunteer opportunity. And we had to go through background checks and red tape. So it was lucky I reached out well in advance, or else we wouldn't have been able to volunteer with youth, which is obvious. And it was vulnerable at-risk youth. This group home is for kids where foster care didn't work. We were there with the kids. We told them about what we were doing. They had normal, interesting questions. How many shoes are you going through? Stuff like that. And then we spent the day with them. We ate lunch with them. We played kickball. We flew kites.
So if someone, maybe a young man just graduated from college, it could be a young woman, a young person graduated from college, looking to, figure out their stuff, figure
Yeah.
out where they fit in the world, how to do good in the world, what would you tell that person today?
If they were like thinking of walking across the country,
Yeah.
I would say, where's your parents? I was like, can we have this I don't want you to run home, tell your parents that this guy told you to walk across the country. But if someone was coming to me and they're like, man, let's say I gave a speech out of high school and it resonated with an individual and they came up to me like, after I graduate college, I want to do what you did. I'd probably encourage them to think long and hard and to talk with their parents. But I would also be like, well, depending on their age, I'll be like, all right, sit with it for a few years. And if you're still feeling called to do this, I call it a calling. It's just like this deep feeling that you need to do something that you don't really understand why you need to do it, but you know you need to do it. If you're still feeling that, I would encourage you to do it. I would encourage you to plan for the unplanned if you can, but don't rely on the plan and do it. Um, I like when people want to do atypical
Yeah.
things.
And
Um,
so, how do you carry the lessons that you experienced through this walk, how do you carry those forward in the work that you do today?
I spend a lot of my time talking about my childhood mostly and about how what I've learned over the years to not only understand why I'm well adjusted, but to hopefully take that understanding and help other people adjust to the trials and tribulations in their own life, and to obviously let people know that if I can do it, they can do it. That old cliche. I've been very focused on helping people build resilience.
Yeah.
I haven't spent as much time taking the lessons from the walk and relaying those to other people. But one thing I always hope comes out in my work that I was reinforced on the walk is that, people are just people, and most of us are trying to do as much good as possible, be the best person we can. And we are a spectrum of good and not so good when you take our whole life and all that we've done, and that we all deserve grace. But something else I think that comes up a lot is, and this is just very practical, and this is really going to be repeating something your listeners have already heard, but very prevalent to the walk, was just literally taking things one step at a time. We couldn't look to Santa Monica, California. You talk about, did you have a moment where you're like, screw this, there's no way this is going to happen? And I can confidently say no. And I think it was because we were able to break the walk down unintentionally into much smaller, manageable goals. We talked about looking towards a city where we were going to set up a base camp and volunteer. Well, that's a much shorter, much more manageable goal than Santa Monica, California. We didn't intentionally do that, but it was a byproduct of what we were doing. And I think it helped us immensely.
I do think that that is brilliant. And it's really, how we do anything, whether someone is settling into a new relationship or someone going off to college or dealing with an illness and treatment, like anything that we do, recovery, right? Anything that we do, we have to look at it in small, manageable pieces in order to not let ourselves get overwhelmed with the magnitude of the task.
Right.
And to be able to, and this ties into not seeing ourselves as someone larger than life comes up for me, right? Like, who am I to walk across the country? When we continue to see ourselves as small, insignificant individuals, which is how I think most people see themselves, it's hard for us to understand the impact we can have on the world, or the impact we can have in our community and in our relationships when we're looking at the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
So I do think that small, one step ahead, keeping one foot forward, so that you're constantly moving in the direction of what you want to do. And that came through really loud and clear in our first conversation, where, you started, you had a goal from an early age to be a good father and a good husband, right?
Yeah.
And having that without knowing how to do it, what you did over the course of a lifetime is just keep moving in the direction of what you want in small ways. And I think that message comes out in this walk. It was one day at a time, 20 or 30 miles at a time. And you were resourceful and strategic with an end goal in mind, without getting caught up in the how. And it is often the how that keeps us from ever starting.
Yeah, if everyone waited until they thought something wouldn't fall apart, overly focused on the how, nothing would ever get done.
That's right. So we're going to wrap up, Nick. And Anything come to mind that you want our listeners to take away from your story, from your life experience, from the work that you do today?
Um, let's keep it about the walk, just because
Sure.
that's where we spent our time. I think we are focused on the wrong thing, the collective we. And I guess I'll wrap it up with a story to kind of illustrate what I'm saying. We were in Texas. I think we were a couple days into Texas, and if there are a bunch of Yankees listening to this podcast,
And there are, I can tell you
you
that.
already have your own preconceived notions as to who lives in Texas and how they think. And we kind of were introduced to the whole overemphasis on race by the time we were in Arkansas, where we were having these radio interviews, and these were black gentlemen, but they were more focused on the fact that Sam and I were white and black walking together rather than what we were doing. I found that interesting. But we were a couple days into Texas, and we walked 30 miles trying to find somewhere to sleep. There were two churches, nothing else, no motel, no one to put us up, no obvious area to pitch a tent. We would usually try to find a church with like an overhang or a vestibule and just sleep there, because our thought was, well, if anyone bothered us, maybe they would let us sleep in the church if they were a part of the church. Right. Anyway, there were these two churches, and there was one with an overhang, and we were going to make it there, and we were just going to sleep there. And it was late. We walked till about 11 o'clock at night. Got to this church, lied down, ground pads, sleeping bags, opposite ends of this vending machine. And there was a parsonage, and a parsonage is usually like the pastor's home, within not only earshot, but we could see it. It was maybe 20 yards away. Lights were on, didn't concern us too much. You know, we're well over 1,000 miles into this journey. We're not concerned with things other people are concerned about. We're just trying to eat, sleep, and walk. The door opens to that parsonage, and I hear someone squeal. And then I hear the door slam. And I can't see, but Sam has a clear view of the house. I was like, Sam, did someone see us? And he's like, yep. 3 minutes later, two gentlemen come out. And I'm going to paint you a perfect picture of a Texan, but also the perfect picture of men you know in Maine, in New Hampshire, and Massachusetts, because they're everywhere. This guy comes out in a cutoff tee and like a racer hat, like tilted up, in jeans. I grew up with kids like this. Not alarmed. Southern drawl was new. But he says, what y'all doing? So we get up from our sleeping bags, and I notice he has a shotgun in his hand. And then there's a gentleman behind him, more buttoned up, buttoned down. And Sam told me later that he had a pistol behind his back. It's Texas. Right? We're not exactly worried. We come from Maine. People have guns. They don't carry them around like they do in Texas and Arizona, but we have them. And we told this young guy, he was probably our age, what we're doing. And the guy looks at me, and I'm like, am I about to find out that we're in Texas? Like what we've been warned about? And he tells me we're not safe. And he says, especially you. I'm like, I am about to find out we're in Texas. And he goes, there are people around here who would do you real harm. He says it in some Southern colloquialism. I'm like, oh. It's like, oh boy, that sounds serious. And then the guy behind him steps up. He's like, hey, I'm the pastor of this church. This is the youth center. You can sleep on some couches here. And they let us into the youth center, and they're talking to us. And the younger guy reiterates, he's like, let us give you a ride to the other end of the next town, because the next town that you're about to walk through is a haven for the KKK. And I've never heard of such a thing. I've heard of the KKK, but I've never heard of a haven for the KKK. And he told us some stories of the past. No one getting killed or anything, but he's like, you're not safe. You should really take the ride. But I'm committed to walking across the country. I want to take the ride. And that's really not pertinent to the story. But Sam's a little worried. He's like, crazy racists scare me. And I'm like, in my head, I'm like, crazy racists should scare me, but I'm not really worried. Like, what's the chance? Like that naivete, that Yankee naivete. Anyway, this is a partnership. If Sam's scared, if it brings into question the integrity of the walk, would take the 5 mile ride to the other end of the time of the next town in the morning for safety reasons. Anyway, the pastor gives us a ride to the next end of the town, drops us off, bids us farewell. Maybe 5 minutes goes by and a big old pickup truck pulls over to the side of the road. And I'm like, oh man, am I about to find out that this is the Texas I've been warned about? Am I about to learn today? And we kind of put our heads down and, don't make eye contact. And we're just going to walk by this truck. As we're walking by, the windows rolled down, and this man and woman, probably in their late 50s, early 60s, like jolly Ma Pa kettle, just poked their, like, hey, how you all doing? I'm like, that is not what I expected. And they're like, are you guys hungry? And Sam and I were like, yeah, we could eat. And they're like, all right, you just wait right here. We're going to go pick you up the best sandwiches this side of Texas. And they leave, and we walk a little bit, and 20 minutes later, they show up, and like, come meet them in the truck. And we're sitting in the truck, and we're just eating with this couple who just saw us on the side of the road. And we're just chatting. And I'm just thinking, I was like, this is representative of the interactions we've had with people up to this point in the walk, from Maine to Texas. And I was like, over and over again, Sam has proved that people are just people. And we're focused on the wrong thing. I'm a black man. Sam's a white man. Outwardly, we're different. We're very different than this older white couple. But for whatever reason, people are opening their homes, their cars, giving us money, giving us meals. People are proving to us that there is a huge capacity for good. And there is a necessity to see us as humans, not just us, but each other. And when you can do that, you realize that we're focused on the wrong thing.
Yes.
And I believe that more than ever right now. A gentleman asked me a few years ago if I'd walk across the country in the current political environment, and I unequivocally say I would absolutely walk across the country in the current political environment. And my expectation would be that I would meet the same good Americans that I met 13 years ago. Doesn't mean there aren't people that wish me harm or you harm or any of us harm.
That's right, Nick.
There's always that risk and possibility.
And I'm going to tell you, I will join you in that walk.
Yeah, I'll put my faith in the Americans I know any day of the week.
And I don't want to limit it to Americans. I put my faith in humanity. We're focused on the wrong things because we focus on our differences. When we can start focusing on, the core likeness that we have, right? You and I, we're a different gender. We live in a different part of the world. Our skin is a different color. Our experience in life is different. But at our core, we are the same. So the more that we can focus on there is good in the world, and we are that good, and expect that other people are also good, it will change the way we experience life. So with that, we're going to say goodbye, you and I. And I am so glad that you could be with me again today. And I can't wait for our listeners to hear all these stories and the bits of your walk. And there's so much more. Like when you offered at the beginning that we could get into the weeds, I would love to know all of the weeds. How many pairs of shoes did you go through, right? Like how much weight did you lose? Like
10 pounds, I think.
Yeah, we could get into the weeds, but really behind this story and the details of the how really is the beauty of the what. It is the enormous capacity that we as humans have to do something that we're being called to do, even if we don't understand it,
Mhm.
and to carry those lessons and experiences for good in our own lives and in the lives of others. So,
Yeah.
thank you for sharing that with our listeners and me. And I
Thank you for
can't
having
wait
me.
to hear more of the storytelling as you, I mean, the work that you're doing is so important. And the focus on your childhood and your resiliency and how you are contributing to the world because of and in spite of the life you lived
Yeah.
is critically important. So that's it. Anything else for you before we say goodbye?
I think I would encourage your audience to go talk to somebody they perceive as different to
Oh,
them.
yes.
Just go
Amen.
try it. Because that's what we did on the walk, is we talked to somebody at several, I mean, from
From the
Maine to
other side of the
California,
tracks.
Maine to California, all over this country.
That's right. Yeah.
Um, and it was a beautiful thing. And
Yeah.
it really can, if you don't have faith in humanity, at least maybe light the pilot so that you can work towards having a little bit more faith and the goodness of others, or at least the fact that most of us are trying to do the best we can and we're not as evil as one might think.
That's right. When you look for evil, you find evil. When you look
Yeah.
for good, you find good. Yeah.
Amen.
All right. Thank you again. I will talk to you again soon.
Okay.
And I bet this is my prediction that we're going to have you back on the podcast again, and the next time with Laurel, because I know she has a lot of questions that she wants to discover and learn about you. So thank you
Yeah.
for
And if,
that.
I mean, I would love to meet the other Laurel.
Yeah.
She's an enigma right now. I've seen a photo. If, and if any of your listeners have any questions for me, I don't know, maybe we can provide them with a way to, I mean,
Yeah.
they could, I don't know, do you have my email?
Yes. So
Yeah,
what we will
we can
do
provide
is
them with that.
I put your email, your website, and your Instagram page in the show notes. So
Okay.
our listeners will have a way to get in touch with you.
Yeah, I'm happy to talk to anybody, answer questions you might have. If you're an educator and work at a high school and you guys need a dynamic speaker, I'm going to plug for myself. I've made a decision in the last couple of weeks. I'm going to stop being shy. I'm going to stop undervaluing myself. I'm going to stop negotiating my wage down before I've even negotiated with administrators. I'm I'm going to
That's
stop
right.
being shy. Um,
Yes.
I'm
Yes.
here.
And I'm going to leave you with this. No different did you make the commitment to start or take a bold step as a 23-year-old. That is the commitment that you have to make today with your future as a speaker, because all it takes is a commitment to do something bold, which is something you've never done before. Do it differently. And don't worry about the how, Nick. Do
Yeah.
not worry about the how. Just step into the commitment.
Amen.
Yes. Okay, we'll talk again soon.
All
Thank
right,
you.
Laurel. Thank you.
Listeners, bye for now. Thank you again for joining us. And we'll see you next week for more.
Bye, listeners. Bye, Laurel.
Bye.